On today's episode, we welcome Tom and Alexie to the show. Now, many of you know Alexie very well from her very popular Instagram account at Epic Quest for Baby Riley. And so I'm sure many of you feel like you already know her and her journey so well, but we're going to get in depth about it. During this episode, they speak to us about their 6-year fertility journey, the various clinics that they went to, and the many treatments that they tried. They also get real with us about the emotional roller coaster and what it means to take a break sometimes and to take time to focus on their own relationship. Again, you can connect with Alexie on Instagram at Epic Quest for Baby Riley and Tom on Instagram at partner_in_fertility. We previously hosted Tom on the podcast on episode 49 to speak about the fertility journey from a male partner's perspective. And we encourage you to give that a listen as well if you're interested.
Hello, Alexie and Tom. Thank you so much for being here. I am very much looking forward to this conversation. The first question we have for you today is just the beginning. Tell us about your journey and how you ended up here talking to Dr. Weiss and myself on my fertility podcast on this very cold, snowy afternoon in April of 2025.
Go for it.
Yeah. So back in 2018, Tom and I started trying to conceive. We realized that we were having some difficulties and nothing seemed to be working. So we sought the help of a fertility clinic. And the first fertility clinic that we went to, said that
You're young,
yeah,
you're healthy, should be no problem.
Yeah.
yes, everything's going to be fine. The only issue was that we were dealing with male factor infertility. And so we did a funded cycle with that first clinic, ended up with 2 embryos, and both embryos failed to implant. Looking back as someone who's quite seasoned in the trials and errors of fertility treatments, the protocol that I was on at the time obviously wasn't enough. After 2 failed implantations with that clinic, I said, you know what? I'm not comfortable with what's happening here. I want to go to a different clinic.
Well, yeah, they weren't presenting us with any other options. We asked, where do you go from here? And they said, we just keep doing the same thing again and again.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
eventually it might work.
Yeah.
So we weren't comfortable with that.
No, I didn't like that answer. So we went to a second clinic where we did several rounds of IUI. We ended up getting a chemical pregnancy from one of our IUIs. So we did 6 total. And the fertility doctor at that clinic referred us to Dr. Vero at Markham Fertility Center, stating that I had unexplained infertility and that they couldn't help us any further.
Right.
So we did a second retrieval, which resulted in a mosaic embryo. And then we wanted to do and explore immunotherapy. So to do that, we wanted to get at least 2 euploid embryos. So we did our third retrieval, which was brilliant. And I think we got 6 embryos from that round. 2 of them were euploid. And we did several transfers. And unfortunately, I went for an ultrasound and the first one didn't have a heartbeat. Then I had a chemical pregnancy. And then I had a blighted ovum. After that, it was questionable what we wanted to do moving forward. We took a little bit of a break.
That's when we took a break.
Yeah. And then
And that's when you went to Alaska, no? Is that where you went to your Alaska trip?
Yeah, we went to Alaska.
Highly recommend Alaska cruise.
It's on my bucket list.
Oh, it was beautiful.
It was gorgeous. But after all that, emotionally and especially for Alexie physically, we really thought we needed a break. I think we both wanted to continue,
Yeah.
but just for mental and physical
Yeah,
health.
I
we're
remember
like, we're
that
gonna
conversation. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, we had it with you. And it's like, we're going to take a step back. We need a little bit of time
Yeah.
here, which was, I think, a really, really good decision.
Yeah.
because it let you refresh and
Yeah, and then
recover a
you
bit.
came back refreshed, exactly, and ready for the
Yes.
next
Oh,
part.
yeah.
Mhm.
And that's when we decided, you know what? I've never done a fresh transfer before. Can we try that in combination with immunotherapy? And now I'm pregnant. I'm 33 weeks tomorrow.
Yay! Amazing.
Okay.
After 6 years of
It's
6 years.
that's a major summary of the last
6 years.
6 years.
Yeah, 6 years in 5 minutes. Go.
Yeah, not mentioning how challenging it is, how emotionally challenging it is, the amount of treatments that we tried. We did medications, rounds of immunotherapy. We did, I feel like once we got to Markham Fertility Center, we really like tackled and tried everything that we could do.
Mhm.
And I believe that's why we are where we're at today,
Yeah.
because, unfortunately it is trial and error.
But you have to have
But
new
you
things
gotta
to
keep
try.
trying different
Yeah.
things. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I mean, we needed options, which Markham provided to us, right? We didn't want to just do the same thing again and again and again for 3 years. That seemed pointless. But as we had many more options, we were willing to try everything.
Along the, a lot of people call it a journey. I've called it an epic quest. Along this journey, we found out that I had a lot more issues than they ever looked for in previous clinics. Like I had immune issues, I had endometriosis.
But the first clinic didn't really look at you at all.
No.
They just said, you're young, you seem healthy, everything should be good. It was.
And I believed it. I really believed that everything was going to be okay and that was going to be the answer. And it's a huge blow when that doesn't happen, because then you think there's something wrong. I'm broken.
Yeah. Yeah. So you were referred to Dr. Vero and you got stuck with me.
we were blessed with you.
Oops.
No.
Sorry.
I purposely asked. Purposely. Yeah.
What a wild journey. What a crazy story. I mean, so much to unpack from there. But one thing that really struck me and that I wanted to ask you about was that break that you took. I think lots of fertility patients who have these longer journeys or epic quests, which I love the way you call it that, sometimes patients are at a point where they're just burnt out, emotionally, mentally, financially drained,
Physically.
tapped out. And there's always this kind of pressure to like keep going and age and time and the biological clock ticking away versus taking a break. And so how did you come to that decision to take that break? What was that break like? How long did you take? What did you do during that break? I mean, other than traveling to Alaska, which sounds amazing, what kind of advice would you give to other patients who are, let's say, in that burnt out, tapped out spot?
I'd say, first of all, there's also, I found, a lot of pressure from within the community. There's great community online for other people going on the journeys, but there is a lot of pressure just from the community itself to keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. Then when we did take a
Right,
break,
that
I
like
think,
rah, 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 keep cheerleading
just,
away. Yeah.
don't stop, keep going. Like it's a form of giving up or something.
Yeah.
But we had been feeling burned out for quite a while. I was, really concerned, especially about Alexie, like on all those medications for all that time, taking a toll on her body. And I think in the beginning, when we started talking about break, you felt that you needed to keep going. You needed to keep going. But we talked about it a lot. And I guess you also realized that you were pretty tapped out as well. It's like you were saying, we were burned out and we were recognizing it and we wanted to keep going. But I really had the strong feeling that if we were too worn out for the next step, that doesn't work in our favor, especially Alexie's emotional and physical state. I think I explained that like running races, right? You don't just constantly run a marathon or constantly lift weights. You need to rest. If we took that time to refresh and then kept going, we'd be in a much better state for a more successful round, hopefully. I thought it would be a benefit for our next round instead of just being worn out, tired, exhausted. And that's how I remember the discussions going.
Yeah. And being your doctor, I could say that break really helped because when you came back, it was like different, That's when we started talking about endometriosis and mapping. And there was a whole new leg of the journey that was still happening, but you were ready, you were calm, you were
Yes.
determined, and it's almost, I don't want to say healed because that's a strong word, but you certainly were more resilient and just ready to bring it on. And I think it did you both a lot of good from my perspective.
How long did we take a break for?
From
3 months?
October to May.
Okay. So yeah, 7 months, 6 or 7
Yeah.
months we
Yeah.
took.
There was times during this whole thing that we would take 2-month break. We would take 2 to 3 months. But after our last loss, that ended in a DNC back in 2023. I think that's how.
Mhm.
Yeah. Back in 2023, I felt like that just broke my heart. And I just really needed the time to step away from feeling like a patient. When during this whole time, I felt like we were constantly doing things back to back, back to back. And it was really like I felt in our relationship that I was a patient. We would do things obviously to negate those feelings, but I needed to really step away. I made that my whole persona, my whole identity. I made that, I'm an IVF warrior. I can do anything. And you can. I was.
You
But
did.
I did, but it's also sometimes, I needed the rest. And Tom used the metaphor of like getting the house ready for a storm.
Yes. Yeah.
Because,
House has to be strong and sturdy for the storm, right? Or else
yeah,
it'll just blow over.
yeah,
That's right.
And we got some time to focus on us
yeah.
instead of focusing on the journey 24/7, which was really good for us.
Yeah,
I remember you even closed the account for a little bit.
I
EpiQuest for
did.
Baby Riley. You closed it, and I think you changed it to just you or traveling or something. And
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
no, so you
I
went through all, yeah.
I stepped away.
I'm building a fortress. That's great.
It was one of the healthiest things I think that we did. I really focused on doing things that made me happy. I'm focused on eating well, exercising, just doing things just for me and connecting with Tom,
Mhm.
which I desperately needed.
Oftentimes, when I'm talking to patients who are on these really long journeys, and I can see that maybe that burnout is starting to happen, and I'm worried that that burnout is starting to happen, I tell them, I say, listen, guys, like, if it's a situation where it's a couple, I'll say, at the end of the day, it's going to be you and you,
Mm-hmm.
right? And at the end of the day, whether you have a successful pregnancy or not, because again, I don't know, I don't have a crystal ball, it's going to be you faced with your partner. And you have to keep that relationship. There has to be something beyond doing fertility and doing IVF, regardless of what happens, regardless of the outcome. I'm so glad and so awesome to hear somebody say, it's nice taking that break can actually be so beneficial in the long run because so many patients are so scared and so anxious about it, right? I tell people, like 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, it's not the make or break of life. It's one small, small piece of time in the grand scale sometimes. And if you come back and you're in a better situation, better scenario, you can do it better in the long run. And it's so awesome to hear that. And I love that story so much.
So, haven't been the couple that is like, oh, everything is great, you're young, it's going to be easy, to being a couple where your doctor basically throws everything at you from surgery to immune to IVF to different transfer protocols and things like that. What is one thing that you wish more people understood about infertility or being on a journey or an EpiQuest, like you call it, which I love, by the way?
I think a lot of people that I talk to when they're first starting out, I tell them that unfortunately, the reality of going through fertility treatments is that it's trial and error.
Thank you.
A lot of what works for me, because I've had so many people reach out to me being like, what was your protocol? I need it to be my protocol. Something finally worked for you. Tell me everything. And I'm like, this is what I did, but it may not work for you. You are different than me. And unfortunately, when things our trial and error, it takes a bit of time. And the reality is that it's just not something that can happen right away. And I think that can be very shocking to a lot of people. I was shocked when we had 2 failed euploid embryos. I was shocked because I was told a story that everything was fine and this was going to work for me. But I think the reality is that people need to be told that, we're going to try our best to figure out what's going on. And with the knowledge that we have at the time, this is what we can do. When I'm talking to a lot of people, I just, explain that this is the reality of what you're going to go through. And it may take 1 transfer, it may take 2 transfers, it may take 3. For us, it took 6. And everyone's different.
Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, honestly, I'm gonna just like take a clip, and in every new console, I'm just gonna be like, before I say anything, please listen to Alexie and Tom, and then I'll give you my speech. And it's exactly right. And I mean, Dr. Weiss can talk about it. Sometimes we do have patients that are young and everything looks great, and it's just a simple male factor. And the majority of the time, it does work the first time or the second time, and you don't need to do 6 transfers and surgeries and immunes and all of those things.
Yeah.
But you're right. I always tell patients, see, I think you have a good prognosis. You've got all of these pieces. We're going to start here. And yeah, there is a percentage of patients. I tell them your ovaries sometimes just don't read the test book. So we have to throw out the test book and start looking at other things that unfortunately are trial and error. And I'm glad that you, having experienced all of that, sort of gone into a point of understanding and accepting that. Because one of the things that I struggle with is that sometimes patients find the answer after 6 transfers, and then they feel like, you should have found the answer after my first transfer. Like, you should have done my surgery on day 1. You should have done a skeg and all the things like the first time I came to see you, which we just can't, because these things, surgeries are invasive and these things are not fully understood. And, you wouldn't fix your house for the storm unless you see that there is a storm there. And you want to react to what's happening. As physicians, our goal is to do the least amount of stuff for the highest reward, right? And then when the reward is not happening, then we have to increase the stuff. And the reward is not happening, and then we increase the stuff. But we always want to start with doing as little as possible to give you the highest pregnancy rate. And that ratio sometimes changes as your journey goes on.
Yeah, and honestly, there's nothing fun about lit. There's nothing fun about skig.
No.
And wanting to go straight to that stuff without maybe not even needing it.
That's right.
Like, I think every time after I did skig the next day, it was so emotional for me. And yeah, I would just say, see what you can do first without going for like the big guns at the very beginning, because the big guns can be traumatizing too, in a way, as much as they're needed, right?
Yeah, skig would always make you feel awful.
Yeah.
The next day or 2 should be very emotional, plus all the physical discomfort with the things we went through. But yeah, I'd say a couple or an individual coming into this, epic quest or journey, hopefully it does work right away and quickly for you, but they should also be cognizant and realize, like you were saying, that it might not. This could be a long journey. Hopefully not, but it could be. So I think if we had known, we would have been maybe a little more emotionally prepared for that. And I'd also say, you have to learn and advocate for yourself.
Yes.
Within your clinic, within multiple clinics. And there are lots of clinics out there, different clinics for different people. But if you're not happy or comfortable with the one you're at, look at your options. And if you feel like you're not getting enough care, go for another opinion, right? You don't realize how many options are out there for the clinics to try until you're out in the world. And like I said, some clinics were more limited. Our first clinic just said, this is what we do.
Yeah.
And we'll keep doing it. Kudos to the second clinic we saw where she said, hey, I've reached the end of my line, but there are other people who can do more, and referred us to Markham, which was, I think, a lot better. If we had just stayed with the first clinic, who knows, we might still be just doing the same protocol 6 years later.
I think that's a really good point that you bring up, and something that I think that maybe is not so well expressed in the world of fertility and fertility clinics is that fertility physicians, fertility clinics are so wildly different and so wildly unique. And I'm not talking about, their personality. Well, okay, personality is important. If you like gel with your doctor, if you don't gel with your doctor is important. But in terms of even how we practice, how we do things, what treatments we offer, what treatments we don't offer. And so it's not like, I don't know, you have a lump and you get referred to a surgeon to take out the lump in your arm, where the vast majority of surgeons are probably going to do it in much the same way with very, very similar results. Fertility and fertility medicine is like 90% art, 10% literature and guidelines and all these fancy things. So what I'm trying to get at is that practitioners in the field of fertility, we practice in such different ways and we do such different things. And I think nobody's wrong. Nobody's doing anything bad, but we're all interpreting the studies and the information slightly different ways. We all have slightly different comfort levels in doing things that maybe aren't so evidence-based or that maybe aren't so widely accepted by physicians in the world of fertility. Fertility is like so different than any other area of medicine for that reason. And so seeking a second opinion, seeing different clinics actually makes so much more sense in the world of fertility, I would argue, than maybe other areas of medicine. I mean, obviously I don't practice other areas of medicine. I've been in fertility land for
way too long.
for a decade now. But from what I recall, it's just so different. You go to a cardiologist, you have high blood pressure, they have a guideline. There's literally this like
algorithm.
Yeah. First line, do this. Second line, do this. Third line, do this. And I was like, wow, guidelines and algorithms. When was the last time you saw an algorithm for something in fertility, Mavis?
Mm-hmm. I mean, if we follow the guidelines, like you guys wouldn't be pregnant.
Yeah.
Quite frankly. The guidelines are great for like a percentage of people that get pregnant with, standard IVF and embryo transfer. And this is what we specialize with in Market. That, like I said, they just don't read the guidelines. They don't read the test books. And then you could say like, keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect different results,
And technically that's not wrong. I mean, technically that is what the textbooks will often say.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But I personally don't feel comfortable with that. And obviously Dr. Garcia doesn't feel comfortable with that. That's why she doesn't do
patients don't feel comfortable with that. That's why
we
weren't
here. Comfortable with that.
Yeah.
It's become apparent on our journey, that it's very much still an emerging science. And any doctor we've been with is, doing their best to be learning from and keeping up with the latest research and studies that's constantly just coming out, right? Mm-hmm. So I think you're right. Like everybody is trying their best, with the latest information, but there's also always new data coming in, new studies coming in, new information emerging, new things to try, right? And maybe some things that were tried before. Okay, we've studied them more. Maybe we don't do that anymore. It seems to be a very dynamic field. Mm-hmm. And being on that journey, we're part of that emerging science, right?
Exactly.
Things are being tried with us, and that information's going into, the field and other doctors probably, and everybody's learning from everybody. Yeah. So it's very dynamic.
Yeah. So I have a question for you, because I remember being as your doctor, I've navigated this situation where you finally get your positive pregnancy test. And as you mentioned, it wasn't the first time, like the baby Liam right now, it wasn't the first time that you were pregnant. So there were other times when you were pregnant and we felt great, and then the beta dropped, so the ultrasound isn't great. So every time that there is a new pregnancy test, positive test, I am happy. I'm excited for my patients. I want to transfer that to them because I really do believe this is going to be the time. But of course, it's hard to navigate those feelings of like, yes, it worked, but now the next step is it going to stick, or am I going to get my heart broken again? So my question is, how do you navigate that balance between hope and protecting yourself? And how do you think your doctor should navigate that balance? Because I still 15 years doing this struggle with that perfect dose of optimism and caution for my patients.
I'm going to be taking notes to this answer.
I don't think we found any formula to help navigate that. I think as time went on, we became jaded to protect ourselves. The first couple of pregnancy tests, I remember the first positive pregnancy test, we were in the bathroom and Lexi collapsed, crying in joy, right? It was such a beautiful thing. But then you begin to realize that, a pregnancy test doesn't mean what we thought it meant.
Yeah.
And the first rising beta doesn't mean what we thought. The second rising beta doesn't mean what we thought it meant. And I think you're hoping that it's going to continue, but part of you is protecting yourself by, realizing there's so many hurdles to go through. It's not just a pregnancy test. There's so many steps and stages, and we're not there yet. And even now, tomorrow we're at 33 weeks, and there's part of both of us that doesn't believe this is happening.
Still don't believe it. Yeah.
Still don't believe this is actually
Yeah.
gonna happen. We know logically the odds are everything's good, right? Like if he was born now, he's viable, right? But personally, I'm not 100% there.
I feel like with each positive test, the next positive test the meaning just got a lot
Diluted.
Yeah. Like I remember, as Tom was saying, the first positive pregnancy test. Yeah. I still can think of that and it still makes me emotional. And to this one, two very completely different reactions that came out, because from being like, ooh, the first one, I'm finally pregnant, this finally worked, I'm gonna have my baby, to I really don't know how this is gonna go. And it took me a really long time in this pregnancy to come to terms with the fact that this was actually happening. And it took me a really long time to talk about it, to share. I think I started sharing around 20 weeks when we got a good anatomy scan. I also kind of look back, and I was talking to my therapist about it, and I said, I feel so guilty because I could never let myself get excited about this pregnancy because I was just so scared. It was either I didn't feel pregnant enough, like I would just gaslit myself for the first several months into believing that it was actually true. And I think that was just me trying to protect.
Right.
It was just me trying to protect my expectations, because we never really got a heartbeat before. We never made it to second heartbeat. We never made it this far, and making it this far is really scary.
Yeah. Say, if anything, each next positive step on the journey, from positive pregnancy test to beta to scan to heartbeat, I'd say after 6 years, each time we cleared another marker, it was more scary. It wasn't more reassuring. It was scarier, as now there was so much more on the line.
More to lose. And I think from a fertility doctor perspective of how to support, someone like Tom and I think it's just...
That's hard, because you don't want to say, I know it was a positive test, but, that's not something you want to say to somebody, right?
Yeah, you don't want to go there. Obviously, it's an exciting thing, but I think it's about, again, maintaining the realistic expectations of this is what happens next, or at least this is what works for me. This is what happens next. And we have to see, it's so fragile, right? Yeah. But truly, I felt when we went for I think it was our 8-week ultrasound, and you, Tom, and I...
10-week?
Yeah, or the NT scan.
I think it was before. It was 8 weeks, like a second viability or something. Yeah.
You took us into an office, and I do think the fact that you literally said,
This is it.
This is it.
You're good. You're out of here. Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, are you, in my mind, I was like, are you serious? But I really needed someone to believe that for us, because otherwise, I don't know, I just really needed to hear that.
I mean, the reality is that when you get a beta, as it could go down, and then the ultrasound. But once you get an ultrasound and it has a heartbeat, and then you get another ultrasound and it has grown well and it's got a heartbeat, and you get your 12-week scan, especially if we know it's a euploid embryo. There is a point where, as physicians, we feel pretty confident that it would be now like being struck by lightning kind of a thing. Most likely everything is going to be okay. That point isn't on your first beta, of course, That point is
Mhm.
more in your second viability ultrasound, maybe your NT scan. But I actually do make a point to tell patients, you've made it. Like, you're here now, because I
Yeah.
know that even when I say it, they're not really going to believe it. So if they're having like just say 5% hope, I'm going all in with the other 95% to make sure I fill their pocket. And the reality is, no matter what I say, I know I'm never going to completely take away that fear. So it's not like I'm worried that my patients are going to go home being like, 100% now it's going to be great. They know that nobody has a crystal ball and anything can happen. And of course, everybody has seen those stories out in the world of bad things that happen even late in pregnancy. But statistically speaking, there is a really good chance. And I think that even if you just believe me in that moment and you don't believe it anymore the next day, I just want all of my patients to have a moment where they can just exhale and be like, I am here today, this moment. I don't know what's happening tomorrow, but today, right now, in this moment, I am effing pregnant. And I wanted you to have that.
Yeah, it was helpful.
It was definitely helpful. And I think maintaining realistic expectations between beta and that ultrasound is really important. And then having that confirmation that, yes, this is it. I felt somewhat relieved.
Yeah. Listen, you can't see behind the scenes, but Dr. Weiss can tell you, we suffer too. We're like, so and so happy beta. Yay, congrats. We prayed all the fertility gods, like, so and so is having her ultrasound tomorrow. And then I literally know you're in a room with an ultrasound and I don't know, I can't see the screen. I have to wait. Like, you actually know before I do, because I have to wait for the patient to come out and come with the ultrasound. And then I normally get a Teams message if I'm not seeing them directly, or sometimes I'm able to sneak in from one consultation and go and see them like I did with you. We go through that very stressful time as well, because we also know what you know. Things sometimes don't work out and we don't take it for granted that just because you have a beta, job is done, we're done, like next patient. We're still with butterflies in our stomach and the knot in our throat up until you guys graduate.
Yeah, absolutely. For patients who are also on epic quests, those long journeys, I know when their viability ultrasounds are coming up, and I will wake up and first thing in the morning, I'll be like, oh my God, so-and-so is having their first viability scan today. Like, oh my God, I hope it's good. I hope it's good, because we're on a journey too. It's not the same, obviously, but
Just going back to the stages, and I think you were asking as a doctor, how do we handle this? I think looking back, it would have been beneficial if we had known that. We found out, pregnancy test didn't mean everything by failing. Then we found out first beta didn't mean everything by failing. Second beta didn't mean everything by failing. Right? And I don't think anyone ever explained that to us, that, yeah, these are all good signs, but this is where you really need to get to be certain. Until then, these are the percentage chances. Then I think we would have gone into those better prepared
Right.
That's
Right.
emotionally.
That's a really good point, honey.
And I think, we can do a whole episode on it, because I think the time of knowing that is before you're pregnant, because we also don't want to say to somebody, hey, your beta is great, but all of these bad things can happen. So before you're even getting that positive beta, it's
Right.
like, if your beta is negative, then that means it didn't work. And these are all the things. If it's positive, what that means is that it implanted. It still needs to double. It still needs to get to this level and needs to get this level. So I think we can definitely do a better job of preparing people that way. Yeah.
Yeah, before you even start a protocol.
Before you even start the process.
This is what you're getting yourself into.
Yeah.
Right? And I think I mentioned it on the last podcast we recorded, just for helping patients and getting through this. I think if you did have like a couples or individual therapist on staff, even if it's an extra service, I think having accessibility to that, because if you know someone has gone through this, then it's an ideal chance for someone to reach out to them and say, hey, Jeannie talked through this. I've been there. I know what you're going through. Because if someone then has to scramble to find a therapist, someone they can talk to, might be too late. Easier access would be helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Something that we've kind of touched on during this conversation, we haven't really gotten into, is your Instagram account.
Yeah.
Which is like huge and massive. And I know lots of MFC patients follow you on Instagram. Where'd you get the idea? How did it come to be?
Oh my gosh.
A lot of followers have become MFC patients.
Yes.
It's true. I just had the idea of documenting my first IVF.
That was like the very, very first one that you did, a couple clinics ago?
Yeah. So we did our first IVF in 2019. We were going for diagnosis in 2018, and I just wanted to document it. I wanted something for myself, and it was just this personal thing that I was just doing. And then I was very lucky to connect with a bunch of other people who were going through the same thing. And the infertility community on Instagram is incredible, so supportive. Some of the best people I've ever met. I met my best friend through that. I made really amazing connections with people, but it all just kind of stemmed from the I don't know.
I think it was therapeutic for you.
Yeah.
I think sharing what you were going
Mhm.
through,
Yeah.
you like to express your emotions and you like to talk through things. And I think just going through that process of recording and sharing and getting positive reactions from people,
Yeah.
people appreciating you sharing, I think that really helped you emotionally through your own journey and other people.
Yeah.
Oh, you certainly help other people. That's for sure. Yeah.
I share a lot of my thoughts and feelings and, educational, I guess, things about what I'm doing. And Tom also has his own Instagram that he was working on, and it kind of flourished into something that I didn't even think it was going to be. And now I'm documenting being pregnant, and I don't really know how much further after that I want to do. I've never wanted to be like a mommy blogger or anything like that. But I'm so grateful for the amazing community that's part of Instagram. And I love receiving questions, and I answer the best that I can. And I love connecting with people. And I think it was very important for me to know other people who are going through the same thing that I was going through, and talking to people who actually understood it. When you're going through fertility treatments, it can be very lonely. Like, people in your life, they don't know what to say, they don't know what to do. So it's nice to talk to other people who are going through the same thing that you are.
I've had a lot of patients tell me that they connected through you. Even when you announced your pregnancy, I had a few patients who was like, oh my God, I can't believe this happened for her. I'm so happy. I think community is so important. And I follow a lot of my patients on Instagram, and I've learned from you, even though you're my patient and even though I know all the medical things. Sometimes you guys share on Instagram things that you wouldn't share at the appointment, which makes sense because the appointment is there mostly to get your treatment, right? But I learned a lot because I'm like, I can put together what happened on the appointment and I then see what you're saying. And I'm like, yeah, there's a new angle there that I didn't even realize at the time. And I grow as a person and I grow as a doctor every time I see my patients or even other patients sharing on Instagram. So I find it really valuable. I mean, I've seen your belly pictures every week. So I feel like you're still my patient. Like I see you all the time.
Yeah, and also the fact that you're involved is so important too. I do share a lot of emotional things and the things that I'm thinking and stuff like that. And I know that obviously you've been through your own fertility journey, but there are doctors out there that just don't understand that aspect. They didn't go through their own journey, and they don't know the emotional implications, like how fertility patients feel. It goes beyond the appointments, it goes beyond the physical things that we have to endure. Like, for me, I always felt, yeah, I can do all the needles, I can do all the procedures, but the most hard thing and the most challenging thing for me was the emotional and mental aspect. And that's a lot of the stuff that I shared. And knowing that other people were feeling the same way was really helpful for me. And giving a voice to those people.
Yeah. I asked Tom this question, and you guys should all go back and listen to Tom's episode that we did before. He gave me a perfect answer that I took to heart. So I'm going to ask you, Alexie, now the same question, which is like, how can we do better as fertility doctors? Or another way is like, what do you want fertility doctors to know that you feel maybe they don't know? And you can answer to Tom, but I know that we did talk about it in your episode. Yeah.
This is going to be very personal to me. I think the importance of setting realistic expectations of what the person or couple is about to go through. I think that's really important. And understanding that I think everyone handles information a lot differently. And being a fertility doctor, I think it's important to be mindful of how people process information and how you can be the most empathetic to those individuals. I think that's really important. It can be a very exhausting thing to go through for many different people, for many different things. Like some people can get mentally exhausted, some people can get physically exhausted, some people can get emotionally exhausted. And just knowing how to properly support someone in that state is really important, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Obviously, that might be difficult, but I think just trying your best is what's important, right?
Yeah. And I think the setting realistic expectations
Yeah.
is important. Like I mentioned before, this is what you can expect for all these stages. So you don't think this is the miracle when odds are it might not be. I think we've spoken to the staff there before. I know from the clinic's perspective, you want to be supportive, you want to be happy, you want to be positive, right? But sometimes some people, some clinics can lean too far that way and give too much hope when it might not be warranted at that stage. And that's just potentially setting up for bigger heartbreak.
What was your answer?
I don't remember what
I mean, I specifically asked you how to support the male partner because I said I tend to ignore the men quite a bit and concentrate more on the women. It's just my natural tendencies. So you talked about having support groups for men and including them in the conversation and all of that stuff. You actually gave me advice, which I took. So now when I go into a room and I'm giving hugs to the woman, I go to the guy, hey, can I hug you too?
Yeah.
And then because I was really awkward because some cultures is like, male, female, physical contact. And I was feeling awkward and I don't want to make my patients feel like I've crossed the boundary. So I was just giving a hug to the woman and then walking away. And then the man would be standing there. And I asked Tom how to handle that. And he said, just ask permission. And I was like, why didn't I think of that? So now I'm like, hey, is it okay if I give you a hug too? And that has really changed things for me because they always say yes. And then I feel like I'm not ignoring them anymore. So thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, that must be really good for them.
There was one that it might have been like a day before, a day after, but somebody who went through so much and she got pregnant and I gave her a big hug and I kind of started to walk away and the guy goes, what about me? And I had Tom in my head, okay. I learned a lesson. So thank you so much for that. Thank you for being here with us this afternoon. Thank you for putting your heart out there on Instagram and connecting with the community and helping so many people. Thank you for trusting me even when things didn't look great. You still trusted me. You still showed up. You still did the hard things. I'm so excited for you guys. Can't wait to meet your baby. I might have to make a little trip to Guelph. It's not too far from here. It's a lot closer than Sudbury, and I made it there.
Oh, wow. That's fantastic.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks a lot. It's always a pleasure.
And again, thank you so much for joining us. And I am watching your account with bated breath, waiting to see baby Liam, as I'm sure many, many MFC patients and other fertility patients are too. That baby's going to be born and it's already going to have so much love coming right at it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap for today, Superhumans. If you're looking to connect, get social with us. Follow us on YouTube and Instagram at My Fertility Podcast or visit us online at markandfertility.com. And don't forget, follow, subscribe, and share your favorite episode.
Thanks for listening to My Fertility Podcast and for being a vital part of our community. We know you've got this.
We're signing off until next Tuesday.
If you found this episode of My Fertility Podcast helpful, please take a moment to head over to the review section and leave us your thoughts. Your reviews and comments are incredibly valuable to us and help guide future episodes. We also welcome you to direct your questions to info@myfertilitypodcast.com.
My Fertility Podcast is produced by Rabbit Media Inc. in conjunction with Dr. Garcia and Dr. Weiss.
Music by Mixkit. Life is a Dream by Michael Ramirez C.
My Fertility Podcast is not intended to replace any type or variation thereof professional medical, health, or legal advice, nor should the content be taken as medical advice. Please contact your primary healthcare professional regarding any medical questions you may have. The information presented in this podcast is based on the knowledge and understanding of the host at the time of recording. Medical knowledge is constantly evolving, and new research may change the understanding of health-related topics. While we strive to provide accurate and up-to-date information, we do not guarantee the completeness, accuracy, or timeliness of the content. The views expressed in this podcast by guests are not those of the host or the management. This podcast is not intended to impose any type of discrimination. My Fertility Podcast and its management are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from the use of this podcast.